Hey there, welcome back. It's Shireen. So this is the third in our series so far about introducing beginner level users to the Illustrator workspace and functionality, but also again, if you're somebody who's just feeling a little bit rusty and really kind of want to go back back to basics, we're going to move now. We introduced ourselves. We talked about the workspace, we talked about basic shapes, and now it's time to start getting started with the pen tool. It's something that does have a little bit of a learning curve. But once you feel comfortable, then, it's like riding a bicycle. Once you know it, once you get it, you get it. So I'm going to hopefully help you feel comfortable with the fundamentals of how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Look out for the visual cues that we're going to see, because next to the pen tool, you're going to see different sort of icons that are going to also be guiding your work. Another tip, by the way, is if you still have your fill and stroke set to the default, please go ahead and choose none instead, because again, we're going to be working with open paths, and open paths, the fill, since it's not a closed path, it gets a little bit sort of confusing or gets a little bit wonky when it tries to fill in the shapes. I'll show you that in action once we get started. So one of the first things, again, sort of the big ideas about Illustrator, is one of the ideas is that in fact, these are mathematically calculated path, these vectors, and the information, all the magic happens inside the anchor point. So when we click and release with the pen tool, we've created our first anchor point. And so now we're about to create a line segment, so we can click and release, click and release, click and release, click and release. At any point when we're done, you recall that we could either just hit escape on our keypad, or we're still active in drawing, we can just choose any other tool, and that'll also stop the act of drawing. So as you see here, we've got what we call an open path. That's because this point and this point aren't enclosed. It has none as the fill, and so if we fill it with color, you'll see that that's why I was saying it's better for us to work with no fill, because it looks a little bit wonky and it gets kind of confusing because it really wants to be filled something, with a closed shape. So I'm going to go ahead back and click on no fill. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one away. And again, as a review, to create straight lines, click and release, click and release. If, however, I want to start to create curved lines, we're going to work with something functionality called Bezier curves. And Bezier curves, again, in order for you're the one sort of the master and control of how, the size of the curve, the shape of the curve. And so you're going to, in that case, click and hold, not click and release, but click and hold. And then, as you see, you're pulling out this gorgeous curve. It's up to you to kind of decide the shape, the direction. Once you're sort of happy, we're going to release now. And now I'm going to kind of show you that here, the anchor point is a little bit bigger, that box there, than these little handles. And by the way, you can see that because I have smart guides turned on, I'm able to kind of get used to some of this vocabulary, right? So this one says anchor, this one says handle. And by the way, I still have this preview wanting to happen. So for the time being, I'm going to just go ahead and make my next click and hold. Okay, pulling out that nice little sort of an S curve there. Maybe I say click one more time and release. Okay, and to stop that drawing, I'm going to go ahead and hit the escape key on my keyboard. And now if I use my selection tools, I'm working with my basic selection tool to select my whole path, but let's use my direct select tool to directly select one of these anchor points and start to investigate what's going on. So as you can see here, anchor point, handle, and what I was going to mention before is that the anchor point, again, is what holds all the information. And so it's these handles that when you manipulate them, you can see it's starting to edit both of the line segments that are attached to that anchor point. These handles can be shortened, they can be rotated, turned, okay? But what happens is if you're not using any of the modifier keys, we'll talk about that in a little bit, it's affecting both of the line segments that are attached to that point. Okay, so now we can move with our direct select tool maybe to another anchor. Okay, right? And so that's how we start to have more control around our curves. One other thing, if I only want to affect one of the sides, I can hold the Alt key on the PC or Option for Mac, And when I hold that, you see that I'm only affecting now, remember we said it affects normally both line segments, but now I'm affecting only the one line segment on the one side. Okay, and so then we go back and we can be working individually that way. Remember again too, look at what's happening now. I'm getting one of these cues that I was talking about, that little curve. That means that if you click onto that circle there, you see that? It gives you a soft curve where there was once a corner. So actually there's a lot of information. I want to come over here now and get us to take our head. I'm going to get rid of that shape tear off palette, and I want you actually to take a peek now at your control panel, because there's a lot of related functionality that's happening. So first of all, when two lines meet in a corner, that's called a corner join. And what you just saw happen here is that because in Illustrator we've got this functionality now, right, where we can now soften corner to round just by using right now on the fly functionality. But if we didn't want to do it from here, we can also just do a standard convert of that, the way that those line segments are joined, and we can convert it right up here by just going to convert it to a smooth join. All right, what's the difference that we're seeing, by the way? We're seeing here two line segments coming into a point, but here's two line segments coming into a curve. Aha, we've got handles here. So this is another, again, this video is really helping sort of, again, to kind of wrap your head around some of the basic concepts of how Illustrator works. So these handles here are because when we have a curve, there's Bezier curves. These handles are associated with editing the curves. When there's a corner, there's no handles, okay? So coming back to some other important key bits of information, I'm going to go back and grab my pen tool, and you see that first we've got that asterisk as the graphic icon near my pen, but then as soon as I go back to reactivate from that last anchor point, it turns to a line. That means you're about to add a new line segment. So let's go ahead and click and do that. Let's add a new line segment. Let's just, I don't know, click and hold. Click and drag for a curve. And then something I just want to show you is that as soon as I go to close out, to create a closed path, as soon as I go to close out that path, you notice that there's a circle there now by my pen. So that means if you click on this particular anchor point here, click, 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 and hold, you can now close out your shape. And I just want to, again, I'm going to select with my black selection tool that whole shape and fill it. And now you see that there's not that sort of wonky, sort of uneven filling. It's filling inside my very bizarre shape right now. So I'm going to get rid of this shape, and I'm going to review some of these fundamentals. Once again, to create straight lines, I can just click, and again, you see I want to go ahead and have that none as my fill to make that easier. To create curves, I have to click and drag, click and hold, 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 click and release, click and hold, click and release, click and hold. Okay, and so that's how we're going to start to get comfortable, make those basic choices. Something that we might also want to do now is bring in our modifier keys. So what if we do click and release, hold shift to constrain the direction or the proportion, and then come across, come back down again. Aha, Smart Guides is telling me that I'm going to line up exactly with that perfect anchor point. By the way, I'm going to take a break for a second and come up to View and remind you that under View is where you can access the Smart Guide functionality to kind of show you and give you more, sort of give you an idea of where you are and how you're interacting with your work. So again, Shift being held to create these nice, beautiful straight lines. Okay, I'm going to select that, put that up to the top. Once again, remember that's an open path. So this is why when we work with open paths, right, we want to, if we're creating lines like that, we're working with no fill. And now with some curves, click, release, click and hold. And now again, I'm holding that shift key, and that shift key now is going to give me this nice, not only a beautiful, beautifully symmetrical handles on both sides. And what that does is it sets me up that it's going to want to create a symmetrical curve on the opposite side. Oh, I think I turned off my Smart Guides by mistake. I need those back. Look what happens. There, it shows to me that you're exactly going to be lining up exactly with that other anchor point. So I'm going to do the same thing again. Click and hold. click and release, click and hold, click and release. Okay, so this is how I can start to make these scallops. Okay, I'm going to put that up to the side. Click, release, click and hold, click and hold, click and hold, click and hold, click and hold. So now I'm kind of starting to make this little ruffle. Click and hold. All right, so there's that fun shape there. All right, so you can start to kind of practicing, switching off between click and release, click and hold, and click and hold and drag until you're really getting that nice shape that you want. Oh, I have one last thing I'm going to share with you for this video. When you're drawing, click and drag, click, hold, and drag. When you're drawing, the handles are going to want to, depending on how you've created this curve for this line segment, the handles are going to want to assist you, quote unquote, by kind of putting you into the right direction so that you're already moving along the direction of the next handle. So if I wanted to now create my next point, you see how beautifully it lines up right there with the handle. And so that's great if that's the direction that I want to go in, right? Keep going down vertical. So that's great if that's the direction I want to go in. But what if actually I just want to kind of now double back and kind of go over here? I can just click back on that anchor point, click right onto it, click onto it, and now I'm kind of free to make my next click and hold, to make my next line segment now in this direction rather than being sort of constrained into following the direction of the handle that made. So that's something, again, I'll kind of show it again. My next line segment wants to follow that handle, but if I click right on the anchor, I can now double back and go into another direction, click and hold, and so that's how I can start to feel comfortable navigating my way around. So give it some practice. We're going to do a lot more pen practice in the next few tutorials, but just get started for now and starting to make basic shapes. I would definitely recommend try to make, here's a really easy, I'll actually give you a good suggestion. Okay, you see I'm going back and I want to go back up in this direction, not down here. So clicking back on my anchor point, right? Click back on that anchor point. I'm going to kind of click right here in the middle. Aha, it looks like the top of a umbrella or a half-eaten cookie, depending on how hungry you are when you're watching this tutorial. So a shape like this, I think, is pretty, a pretty sort of, it's a good boot camp kind of shape to get you started and practicing. Start making some of your basics straight lines across and down, and start making some sort of more curvy. See, my next lines are going right in the direction that I am. All right, so this one kind of looks more sort of, kind of blobby, sort of maybe cloud shape. All right, so getting used to the sort of differences in curves and the difference, and sort of starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with creating basic lines and curves with the pen tool. Okay, watch out for the next video. We're going to start editing our paths and doing a little bit more coloring and adding on. All right, thanks for watching.